So, the last few weeks, we've been talking about having certain faith in uncertain times. We've been getting a different word each week that we can hold on to so that when that doubt creeps in, when that disbelief creeps in, when that uncertainty creeps in, we can grab a hold of whatever word that we might need at that moment to remind us of who God is for us and who God is in that moment so that we can have the faith that we need to make it through uncertain times. And I'm just curious if any of you know what those words are. Do you remember the words? There's 3 words that we've talked about so far. Do you remember what those words are? If you know what those words are, type them into the chat and let us know that you've been paying attention the last 3 weeks and that you know what those words are. It'll be a good reminder for all of us. It'll be a good reminder for those that haven't been here the last 3 weeks or are tuning in maybe and have, for whatever reason, missed one or two. So just let us know what you think those words or what you know those words are. And as we've engaged in these words, we believe God because we believe that He is all of those things. We believe Him, we trust Him, we trust that He's going to go about using those things and being those things in our lives in appropriate ways and in the ways that we most need Him to be those things. And we've been looking in the book of Acts, and we've been looking at how, man, you know what? This is exactly who God is. As this church has been starting out, and they were facing some uncertain things, and they were facing a new world, and a new life, and a new faith, and they're going, what are we supposed to do with all of this? And God was these things to all of them. So for us to truly have certain faith in uncertain times, for us to truly believe God, we have to be able to trust Him. Right? We have to be able to know that what He does with the power that He possesses and the power that He is the right thing. We have to know and believe that when He's leading us as our waymaker, that He's not going to lead us astray, that we know He knows where He's going. We have to believe and know that when we put all of our focus and our attention on Him, He's going to give His attention and focus to us, and He's going to know what to do with that. And in our lives, there's nobody else that can fulfill that role for us. There's nobody else that can be that for us. I've been in more than one, let's just put it that way, car accident. Most of those were probably around the ages of 16 to 18 years old. And there were several instances where I wasn't the one driving, so it wasn't always my fault. But almost every car accident that I was in when I was a teenager is because the person that was driving, whether it was me or somebody else, didn't understand or have full control of the power that was in that vehicle and the power that they possessed, right? So we would go too fast into a corner and lose control, end up in a ditch or in somebody's front yard. And we have to trust that as we're going through life and we're trusting in the power that God has and that God possesses, that He's not going to run us off the road, right? That He knows how to use that power to our benefit. I've also been greatly disappointed by people in my life that I've asked to be my waymaker at different times, that I've allowed them to lead the way, right? Where all they've ended up doing is just getting me lost, actually. I can't tell you how many times I've gone with someone to their favorite hunting spot or to their best fishing spot with the words of, I always catch fish here, or I always see animals here, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've left those situations having trusted that person to lead the way. I've left with no fish and having seen no animals. They led me astray, right? If God's going to be our waymaker, we have to trust that God's always going to lead us to the goal, right? That He's going to lead us to the prize, that He's not going to lead us astray. And if God's going to be our nexus, we have to trust that it's not going to go to His head and He's going to know what to do with it. I know people that if you give them your full attention, they're doing this number, right? they're not even paying attention to you when you're paying attention to them. We have to believe that God is going to pay attention to us when we are focused entirely on him. And I believe that we can trust God in all of those settings, that we can have certain faith in uncertain times because of who God is, because of the power that he possesses, because of the fact that he is our waymaker, because of the fact that he is our nexus. I also believe that we can trust him in all of those things because he is the Maestro. That's right. That is our word today, Maestro. Anybody know what a maestro is? Any Seinfeld fans watch the episode about the maestro? But let me tell you what a maestro is if you don't know. A maestro is a distinguished composer or a conductor of music, someone who has elevated themselves to the top of the game, right? They are at their A game. They are the best. They are distinguished. Everybody in their music field recognizes them as one of the best. They are the maestro. They are a master of music. They are a master even of any art. They have mastered it. They know it, right? And so we can have full confidence in the maestros of the world, in their musical gifts and abilities, that they know what they're talking about when it comes to music or the art that they've mastered. We can trust them. Well, God is our maestro. He is a distinguished composer. He is a mastered artist, right? I mean, he created all of it and he did it to perfection initially. He did it and he called it good, right? So he is our maestro, and we can trust the maestro knows what he's doing with his power. The maestro knows what he's doing as our leader, as our waymaker. We know that the maestro is going to do the right thing when we focus on him. He is our maestro. The maestro knows how to put together all of the pieces in our world and our lives to produce the outcome that he desires. He knows how to do that. When I was in middle school, I was in band in middle school, and I actually played the trombone. That's right, the trombone. That's it. I was too short, though, so it was hard to get out to the last position, but I was the trombone guy, and I had a blast with it. And our teacher, which I would say was our conductor, knew what all the instruments could do, knew what they were capable of, knew what each one of us was capable of, and the ones that were really good on the trombone, and then me, right? Like they knew who this was. So he led us that way. He gave us the appropriate pieces of music. He put us in the appropriate spots within the group, within the band, so that we could sound the best that we could possibly sound. And then he stood up there, and he directed us. And he kept us on tune, and he kept us on time, and he made sure that we were coming in at our part at the right moment. He'd give us the point. He'd give us, it's your turn. And he would, and he would direct. And you've seen that. And that's what he did. And we kept our eyes on him. We watched him, right? In that moment, he was our nexus. He was our waymaker. And you watch these fancy orchestras. Today, I've been to a couple maybe orchestras live, and you watch it on TV, and man, that guy's up there just waving it around. But the people watching him know exactly what he's asking them to do when he's asking them to do it, and he's putting all the pieces together, and it turns out to be absolutely amazing. That's what God is able to do in our lives. He's able to move around all the pieces, give us our cue, point to us when it's our turn, and when we listen, man, we get to be a part of making some amazing music. We get to be a part of making something absolutely beautiful, and that's what God does with us. He knows what we can do. He knows what we need to do. He knows what we're capable of. He knows how he's going to empower us, mold us, lead us, shape us. He can do all of that, right? And just as we are obedient to him, we get to be a part of this beautiful, beautiful masterpiece because he is our maestro. Today, I want us to look at a story in Acts chapter 9 where we get to see the maestro at work, of him just moving pieces. And we get to see how God just puts together this beautiful picture. Acts chapter 9, it's a pretty popular chapter in the book of Acts because it talks about the conversion of Saul, who we know mainly as Paul, right? Before he was Paul, he was Saul. Same guy, two different names. But Saul was this persecutor of the Christians. He was a horrible guy, and Saul met Jesus on this road to Damascus. He was actually headed to Damascus to arrest Christians, to persecute Christians, to try and stop the spread of the gospel. And just before this, when last week we talked about Stephen, Saul was there holding people's coats, cheering on the death, the killing of Stephen. So this is the setting. And when we read Acts chapter 9, most of the time we emphasize and we look at and we talk about how Jesus got a hold of Saul and transformed him into Paul, right? But what I want us to do today is focus on a still very important part of the story, but a different person that we don't talk about all that much. But I want us to talk about Ananias today in Acts chapter 9. Because Ananias, of everybody in this story, Ananias is someone I think we can most resonate with. We can most, I don't even know what I'm trying to say right now. So anyway, I'm not even going to cut this part out of the video. We're just going to go with it. Anyway, I think we can relate. That's it. We can relate the best to Ananias, right? And we can understand where he's at. So I want us to spend a minute looking at Ananias and how he learned that God is actually the Maestro. So Acts 9, we're going to start at verse 10. Saul is blind. Saul has been sent his way. And so, but everybody doesn't know it yet. Nobody knows how God is orchestrating all of this. Nobody knows what the Maestro is up to yet. But in Acts chapter 9, it says there was a disciple at Damascus named Ananias. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias. And he said, Here I am, Lord. And the Lord said to him, Get up and go to the street called Straight, and inquire at the house of Judas for a man from Tarsus named Saul. For he is praying. And he has seen in a vision a man named Ananias come in and lay his hands on him so that he might regain his sight. So here's this story. So let's talk about Ananias today. We don't have all the information about Ananias. We don't know a whole lot about him, right? This is not the same Ananias that his wife was turned into a pillar of salt. That's not this guy. This is somebody different. But in what we know about Ananias is that he was a devout Christian, he was an early convert, and he had a really good reputation. We can read Paul's opinion of Ananias in Acts chapter 22. But he was well respected by all the Jews, according to Paul, in Acts chapter 22. So perhaps Ananias was some sort of leader in Damascus of the group of early believers of the early church there in Damascus. I don't know. But what we know is that he was a man who knew God's voice. He was a man who listened. He had a strong and healthy enough relationship with God that when God spoke to him, he recognized his voice. That's one of the things that I want us to really pay attention to here, is that when God said, Hey, Ananias, he said, Here I am, Lord. He didn't have to look around going, Who's that? Who's talking to me? Right? Ananias recognized his God's voice. Folks, when we are living in a right relationship with God and we are regularly communing with him, when God speaks to us, we're going to know it. We might not hear a booming voice, but we're going to recognize God's voice when he speaks to us. We are going to hear him. And we might not understand him, but we're going to hear him. Ananias heard him, but he doesn't understand him, and we'll get to that here in just a second. So Ananias is a part of this band, right? He's a part of the orchestra, and he recognizes the conductor when the conductor points to him and says, It is your turn. The members of the band, the members of the orchestra are always watching, always waiting, listening for the maestro to call to them, to point to them and say, You're up. We've got to be a people that's always listening, always watching. If God is our nexus, then we're always watching. And when God points to us, we'll be ready, right? And we'll be able to hear that's the Lord's voice. Now, I wonder what he had been praying for up to this moment. What had he been focusing on up to this moment? Perhaps he had been praying for some time about the direction that his church or his group were supposed to go. They've heard rumors of all of this persecution happening. They've heard that things aren't going well in other places for Christians. So perhaps Ananias is going, God, how are we supposed to respond to this? How are we going to make it through this? What are you going to do for us? Like, I don't know, but I'm just trying to put myself in that position. And that's kind of what I would have been praying. I would have been looking to the Maestro, looking for some guidance and some direction, just anxiously waiting. When are you going to point to us? When are you going to talk to us? When are you going to commune with us? When are you going to give us some guidance and direction? Are you going to save us? Are you going to protect us? All these things, right? And so I don't know what he was thinking about. I don't know what he was praying about. But all I know is he was listening, he was watching, he was waiting, he was paying attention, and then God called. And I can only imagine, so God says, hey, Ananias, and Ananias is probably going, oh, finally, God's going to tell us how we're supposed to get out of here. He's going to tell us where to flee. He's going to tell us how he's going to miraculously intervene, right? But no, that's not what God says. God says to him, nope, here's what I want you to do. I actually want you to go to Saul. I want you to go to the one that's persecuting you. I want you to go ahead and go find the enemy. I want you to take the initiative and go find the enemy. Go find him, and I actually want you to help him. What? That's what you want us to do? I want you to go, and I actually want you to help him. I actually want you to go and lay your hands on him so that he might regain his sight. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go and to save him, right? So where are we supposed to do this? And I can't even begin to imagine what Ananias must have been thinking in that moment. Here in this moment, though, we can see all of these things that we've talked about God being in this moment. Here in this moment, the Maestro shows up. And here in this moment, we can see the power of God calling to Ananias, Ananias, go and heal his eyes. I'll give you that power. I'll give you that ability to radically transform this man's physical ailment. You will be able to heal it. I need you to go lay your hands on him and give him his sight. Man, we see God's power in that moment. The question is Ananias going to trust that God's using that power in the right way, right? We see God as his waymaker. Let me show you how you're going to get through this. Let me show you how I'm going to lead my church through this time of intense persecution. Let me show you how I'm going to build my church. We see God right there as a waymaker, but is Ananias going to trust him? Is Ananias going to say, okay, I know where you're leading me, so let's go? We see God as Ananias' nexus. He's focusing on him. God has focused on Ananias. God calls to him by name. When God calls you by name. He knows you. So God has his attention. He has his focus. But is Ananias going to trust that focus and attention? That's the ultimate question. Is Ananias going to trust that God is the Maestro? That God knows what he's doing with that power, with that leadership, with that attention? Does he know what he's doing with all of it? That's a question for us. When God starts to reveal himself in our lives like that, when God starts to reveal himself as this one with all the power, when he starts to reveal himself as our waymaker, when he starts to reveal himself as our nexus, are we going to trust him? Are we going to follow him? Are we going to stay focused on him? So when God tells us to go and forgive our enemies, are we going to do it? When God tells us to go and to love our neighbor, and not just in word, but also in action, can you go love your neighbor? I want you to go stand with the disenfranchised. I want you to go and be with and stand with the marginalized. I want you to stand with the discriminated. I want you to be a voice for the voiceless. I want you to defend the defenseless, right? I want you to even at times go and advocate for the guilty. And I want you to go and search for those who are far from me. I want you to go and search for the lost. Like when God asks us to do these complicated, messy, hard things in his power as our waymaker and as our nexus, are we going to trust that he knows what he's doing? Are we going to trust that he's called us at the right time? Are we going to trust that he's directing this thing and he knows how he's putting it together? And do we trust that in the end, this thing is going to be this beautiful, amazing masterpiece? Do we trust that? Or do we sound a little bit like Ananias? It says, but Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard from many about this man. I've heard about how much harm he did to your saints at Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priest to bind all who call on your name. Ananias knew who Paul or Saul was. He'd heard about him. So when God said, I want you to go to Saul, this man from Tarsus, and I want you to lay your hands on him, and I want you to help him out, Ananias knew who he was. So there could have been an opportunity or a time when Ananias was actually praying for guidance in how to handle Saul specifically, because he knew the details about who he was. So in this moment, when he gives the but God answer, and I think that's a response that we can definitely relate to, but God this, but God that. It's not necessarily that we're refusing to obey God, and it's not necessarily that we don't trust God. I don't think Ananias didn't trust God. I don't think that Ananias was necessarily refusing to follow God, but I don't think he quite understood why God was asking him to do what he was asking him to do. This is definitely a reflection of Ananias's confusion. I mean, word has spread quickly. They know what Saul is up to. They probably even knew the role that Saul played in the stoning of Stephen. So as far as they're concerned, this guy's the enemy. And if he's blind and incapacitated by that, then praise Jesus, right? Like, that's an answer to our prayer, because now we don't have to deal with him. God has answered our prayer, and he has saved us, and they could rejoice in that. But that's not the Maestro's plan. That's not what he's doing. The Maestro doesn't always ask us to do things that we understand. He doesn't always ask us to do things that make sense. And so sometimes when God asks us, when he points to us and says, you're up, it's your turn, we might be going, but wait a second. Are you sure that's going to sound good? That isn't going to sound right if I come in at that moment. That isn't going to sound right if I play that note. Don't you think I should do this? Don't you think I should play this way? Don't you think that would sound a little better? It always cracked me up in our band class and our rehearsals when some of the students of the band members would even push back on the teacher and say, no, I think we should do it this way. I always just sat there and just kind of scratched my head like, dude, you're the student. You're not the conductor. Like, he knows what he's doing, right? Do we trust him? Or do we come up with some excuses or some questions for God? Do we have those but God statements when he says, it's your turn. I'm calling on you. But God, did you see what they did to our city last night? But God, did you hear what they said to me? But God, they aren't very nice. But God, they're mean. But God, they're full of anger. But God, this. But God, but they're sinners. But God's the expert. God's the maestro. And we need to know and we need to trust that what he's doing, even if we don't understand it, is for the best. And that he's painting this beautiful picture. And he knows what he's doing, even if we only see this small little part of it. God sees how this whole thing's going to turn out. And he has the ear for it. And he has the eyes for it. He has the vision. We need to trust that vision. So God's asking Ananias, I want you to go help the enemy. And Ananias, of course, is confused by that. Why would I do that? I'm not going. He could have said, I'm not going to do this. I don't understand it. I don't want to do it. Right? But that's not what that wasn't what he did, as we know. That's not his response. But oftentimes that's our response. I don't want to do this because I don't understand it. I remember practicing the trombone at home and thinking, oh my word, this sounds awful, right? Like, it doesn't even sound like music. It doesn't even sound like the song that we're supposed to be playing. It sounds absolutely awful. And then I would go back with the rest of the band and I would be like, whoa, we sound pretty good. See, that's the thing. It isn't always about you, right? It isn't always about how you sound by yourself. It isn't always about making you look good. Sometimes it's about how you sound with the rest of the band. Sometimes it's about how you're making everyone look. Sometimes it's about you playing your part to build up the entire body of Christ. Sometimes it's not about me. Sometimes it's not about you. And the maestro was saying, Ananias, this moment isn't about you. It's about something bigger. God's not always going to give us a solo, right? He's not always going to just give us a solo. He's not always going to put the spotlight on us. Sometimes he's more worried about making the band sound good than making us look good. Sometimes he's more worried about equipping the body of Christ for the work of spreading the gospel and for the work of ushering in the kingdom of God than he is about making you individually look good. We've got to trust that God knows what he's doing. I like how God responds to Ananias, and he says, go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel, for I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. Go. I hear you. I'm not going to argue with you about it, because I am asking you to do something crazy, but I'm still going to tell you to go. Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine. He is someone that I'm going to use to make some beautiful music. Ananias, this isn't about you. This is about him. This is about the good of the band. This is about the good of the team. We need this. And Ananias, I need you to play your part in making this story magnificent and beautiful. See, we're all instruments that God calls on at different times to do different things, right? I was a trombone player, so I never came in during the saxophone parts. I was a trombone player, so I didn't go and try to play the drums. I didn't play the trumpet. I played the trombone. What is it that God's asked you to do? What is it that God's calling you to do? When God says it's your turn, don't try and mimic what everybody else is doing. You do what you're supposed to do. You do what God has asked you to do and trust him with that, because your role is just as important as everybody else's, even if you feel like your role is insignificant. You're making the team look good. You're making the music sound amazing. So Ananias listens to God. Ananias hears God say, I need you to go. And this is what I need you to do. See, if we don't go when God says go and we come in late, if when I was playing my part on the trombone and the teacher said, okay, it's your turn, and I waited 3 minutes, how weird would that sound? How bad would that sound? If we come in late or we play whatever we want to play and don't listen to what the conductor's telling us to play, it messes everything up. So when God says go and when God calls us, let's be sure to do what he's asking us to do and trust that he's making this amazing thing. Trust God to use you today. Even if you don't understand it, even if you don't think it's of any importance, you might just be making the band sound absolutely amazing. The love that you show your neighbor today just might make the church look amazing. The love that you extend to your enemy, the forgiveness that you offer to that person who was mean to you, who was hateful to you, who has hurt you, might just make God look good. It might just bring glory to him. It might just bring honor to him. All of these things that we do has a lasting impact that maybe you're never, ever going to be aware of. But know that you're a part of that story. Know that you're a part of this painting. Know that you're a part of God's plan, and God has a role for you, and we've got to trust him in that. Ananias didn't understand his role. He didn't understand it like we understand it today because he was in the moment. And he only saw a small part of the moment. He saw Saul was messed up. I'm not going to help that dude. That doesn't make sense. But we see this whole picture that Saul went on to become Paul, and Paul went on to start and plant churches all over the region. Paul went on to write a quarter of the New Testament. Like, Paul did some amazing things, but Ananias didn't know that in that moment, so he didn't understand it. And what I love about Ananias is that even without fully understanding what God was asking him to do and how it was all going to play out, he was obedient. So, see, God's our maestro, and for that reason alone, he deserves our obedience, whether we fully understand the things that he's asking of us or not. Be obedient, even if you don't get it. Be obedient because he's God, and trust that he knows what he's doing. Ananias was obedient even if he didn't fully grasp it, even if he didn't fully understand it. It says Ananias departed and entered the house. So Ananias left, went to Straight Street, entered the house, and after laying his hands on him said, "Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road by which you were coming, has sent me so that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit." And immediately there fell from his eyes something like scales, and he regained his sight. And he got up and was baptized. And he took food and was strengthened. Now for several days he was with the disciples who were at Damascus. Look at this beautiful piece of music that's being played out here. Now, I don't know what happened after Ananias entered the house, but at some point, Ananias learned more of the story. At some point, Ananias was filled in with some of the details. Because Ananias knew that Jesus had appeared to him on the Damascus road. He knew that Jesus had sent him to regain his sight and to be filled with the Holy Spirit. Like, there are some details here. And so I don't know what happened. Somebody said that they think that Ananias walked into the house and sat down with Saul and just said, "Hey, tell me what's happening. Why are you blind? Tell me the things that have transpired in your life." I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe he sat down and had a cup of coffee with him. Maybe he heard about it from others who were telling the story. Maybe he heard about it from some people along the road as he was saying, "Hey, do you know where Saul is? This guy from Tarsus, I'm supposed to go find him." And they started saying, "Oh yeah, that dude that met Jesus on the road and now he's blind." So I don't know, maybe just God told him the details. I don't know how he found it out, but all I know is that he found it out. And now check it out, look at this. It says that he sat down beside of him, at least in my head he sat down beside of him, and that he laid his hand on him. And he said to him, "Brother Saul." He's no longer an enemy. He's no longer someone that he's afraid of. Now he's referring to him as Brother Saul. That's a term of endearment, right? Now he's a part of the family. It's amazing what can happen when we take a minute to sit down and listen to someone, even if that someone is our enemy. Even if that someone is somebody who at some point in life was against us, even if that someone looks far different from us, lives far different from us, acts far different from us, dresses far different from us. Like, it's amazing what can happen when we just sit down and take a minute and listen. I think that maybe we need to do more of that. We need to do more sitting and listening, right? To all of our friends and family, neighbors, acquaintances, people we don't know, especially the people that we don't understand. We need to take a minute to sit down and listen. Saul was the persecutor of the church. Ananias was sent to help him. Somewhere along the line, Ananias listened to the story and grasped the significance of this moment and said, "Brother Saul." It changed. This time spent listening, this time spent being obedient, this time spent trusting the Maestro changed how one man viewed another. Neither one of them would walk away the same. See, the Maestro takes seemingly insignificant moments and he weaves them together to make them life transforming. And we know that Ananias laid his hands on him and things like scales fell off of his eyes were healed, and then Saul stood there, hung out with the disciples for a while, learned from the disciples. He got to listen to them. Everybody's listening to each other because Ananias made the decision to trust God as our Maestro, to trust that God knew what he was doing when he was orchestrating this, and he made this life transformative impact. Not just on Saul, but on everybody around him. You never know what your little step or moment of obedience is going to do for the bigger picture. It just might be the missing piece to make everything sound perfect. It might just be the missing piece to make everything sound good. Ananias trusted God and got to be a part of something amazing. He gave a man his sight back. He led a man to his baptism. He led a man into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Just so happens that man was Paul. And while we rejoice and we celebrate the fact that Saul received his sight that day, I also like to think that Ananias received some sight that day. Ananias learned a valuable lesson that day, that God really is our Maestro, that God really can be trusted, that God really is taking all these broken pieces that make no sense and weaving them together into something amazing. He knows the instruments that he has at his disposal. He knows what they can do. He knows when they need to be called on. He knows how to use them. Folks, he knows how to use us. Trust him. He's the master artist. He is the distinguished composer. And what God composes, what God paints, what God puts together, he calls good. Genesis chapter 1, everything God created, everything God orchestrated, it was good. Now we broke it. It's fallen, but he hasn't given up on putting it back together. And he alone knows what it's going to take, because he's the maestro. He's the master. Now it takes Jesus, first and foremost, to make a way for us to find redemption, to make a way for us to find reconciliation. And God's already put that piece out there. God's already given us that opportunity. It took Jesus to make the first stitch. It took Jesus to play the first piece. He's led the way in that. He's that missing piece for all of us. And now God is putting together all of those pieces. Us, all of us, as we are stitched together into Christ, as we are stitched together to the body of Christ, as we play together with Christ. We all have a specific role to play, so trust him. What he is composing, believe that it's good. Believe that it's going to be magnificent. He doesn't know how to do it any other way. He's not going to do it imperfectly. He's a perfect God. He only knows how to redeem you perfectly. He only knows how to put your pieces back together perfectly. He only knows how to do it good. So be a part of the good that God is orchestrating by following him, by being obedient to him, so that when he's conducting that music and he says, it's your turn, you're on, get up and go. Get up and be obedient, even if that means doing something you don't fully understand or comprehend. God is pointing at you. The maestro is pointing at you. He's telling you, do this. Go. Be faithful. Be obedient. Be trusting. Be loving. Be gracious. Be forgiving. Do all the things that I have done for you. Do it with the people that are around you. It's your turn to be a part of making some amazing and beautiful music, to be a part of God's redemptive plan. God is our maestro. Trust that he knows what he's doing with your life. Lord God, we just thank you today. Thank you for your goodness and your grace. Thank you for just orchestrating such amazing things around us. Even if we miss it, we know that it's there. God, I pray that today we be like Ananias, that we take those faithful steps of obedience, and even when we don't understand the steps that we're taking. Help us, God, today to just totally and completely trust you, to totally and completely surrender our lives to you. God, you are our maestro today. Mold and shape us into something amazing. God, we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.